Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am on the second last day of my COVID isolation. Me and my family found out that we had COVID. I just thought I'd take the time to give you guys who haven't had it yet just a quick overview of our experience. There's me, my wife, and my two kids, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. My wife and I are both fully vaccinated. My daughter's fully vaccinated, and my 4-year-old son is ineligible to be vaccinated. So for those of you who haven't experienced it yet, or they're maybe a little bit apprehensive about it with their kids or whatever, I'm going to give you a quick overview of how our experience went and a couple quick tips on testing kids with rapid tests. So I'm going to start with my wife's experience. She was the one to first test positive for COVID. Her first symptom was a burning sensation in her nose, near the back of her throat. And then the next day she woke up and she felt pretty awful. She had a fever, tested positive. Following that, the next day she was pretty drugged down. She had a fever, she had low energy, she had a hard time getting off the couch. Given that, she was still able to get up and do a few chores and mind the kids while I worked. And she was the only one to catch it for a while. And then a couple days later, my 8-year-old who is vaccinated, she caught it. She had a fever. She had an upset stomach. She did eventually vomit after taking a children's Tylenol. And after the Tylenol did kick in, after she was able to stomach it, she felt fine enough to play with my youngest son, who still hadn't had any symptoms. On and off, she had a temperature. She felt kind of groggy for 3 days, had a temperature for about 3 days, and eventually my youngest son, who is not vaccinated, caught it. In the meantime, it's already been about a week. My wife's still feeling pretty down every other day, but through that time, she had her ups and downs. She was still doing a little bit of aerobics, some working out, more housework, and then she would just die down and couldn't get off the couch with varying temperatures, feeling really hot most of the time. She would control the house's temperature to the point where we were almost freezing, but at that point I still hadn't caught it. I had no symptoms, maybe some phantom symptoms, or maybe there was some early on symptoms of just like a stuffy nose, but not really. Negative tests for me. Eventually, after a little over a week of my wife falling ill, my daughter started to feel better. My son, he woke us up early in the morning, said he felt sick. Same thing, we tried to give him some Tylenol. He couldn't stomach it, he puked it up, and he laid very still with my wife for the morning. Eventually, he perked up and started watching TV and forgot about it, and we were able to feed him some crackers. And once he started to get an appetite, he was able to hold down some Tylenol, and we were able to control his fever. Same thing as my daughter. He held on to a fever for a couple days, but he was able to keep down all the medicine, and he didn't really lose his spirit. He played. He had a little bit of a cough, a little bit of some sneezing, and eventually his fever went away, and now he's done his isolation today, finally. And eventually, I finally caught it. My symptoms have been pretty manageable. They've been pretty mild. My worst day, I should even say my worst hour of my worst day. I never stopped working. And any other time in my life, I probably would have went to work every single one of the days. I might have stayed home, maybe, if I was feeling a little bit man-coldy or something, but my worst time, I felt a little dizzy, a little foggy-minded. My fever was just very low-grade fever, wasn't much. I definitely had the best of the whole family, and I'm still isolating until tomorrow is my last day of isolation. Yesterday I felt like I might have had a little bit of a sniffle, no runny nose, barely a clogged nose. Today I had to take a little bit of cold and sinus medicine, no coughing, a little bit of a sensation to cough this morning, but overall, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I would say I had a 3, and that was only for a couple hours on my worst day. Most of the time a 2.5 maybe, at the lowest a 1.5. Very manageable, not even my worst cold symptoms. So You know, if you're in the same shoes as me, I'm in my late 30s, I'm in okay shape, I hike from time to time, I'm not overweight anymore, and I drink tons of water, so if that's you, maybe that's what you can expect. I have I don't have any underlying health conditions, so if that matches you, maybe that's what you can expect. My wife also, she has a pretty healthy diet. She works out from time to time. She got hit pretty hard. She did lose her sense of smell and taste. Her fevers would come pretty strong and go. Her energy levels would drop pretty hard. She never really had much of a cough. I tested her oxygen blood saturation. It was always good. Same with all the kids. Her fever was up there a couple times, nothing too serious. So you might get it as bad as her. She was vaccinated and boosted. The difference between her and I, the only thing I can really think of would just be I have Moderna and she's vaccinated with Pfizer. Her booster was with Moderna. Maybe that makes a difference. Maybe it's anecdotal, I don't know. My kids, one vaccinated, one not, experienced it. They experienced almost the exact same symptoms. So maybe the vaccine may have prevented my daughter from getting worse. Maybe it would have prevented my son from getting feverish, or maybe they're so young it didn't really do anything. It's hard to say. That said, it's not too scary with the kids. I was nervous about my son because sometimes when he runs, he coughs a little bit. I'm like, maybe he has mild asthma symptoms or something, or some other undiagnosed symptom. I was kind of nervous about him getting it, but it wasn't bad. He's had way worse colds, way worse flus. So, prepare for the worst, but expect the best for your kids. If they don't have any underlying health conditions, they're probably going to be fine. Same with yourself. Last thing I want to share with you guys is just a tip that my wife figured out. It can be pretty brutal trying to test your kids. My 8-year-old, my son, was just like fighting them, trying to bribe them, trick them to take a COVID test, and we had to take them in and get a gurgle and swish test for my daughter. It's pretty hard, and my wife just tried my son and daughter's little bit of a runny nose. She just stuck the testing swab in the runny nose that was on their lip. That was it, and it had a nice solid positive line just from that. And so you don't have to torture your kids. If they're symptomatic and you're sure they have COVID, or you think they might have COVID, just get a sample however you can. It's probably good enough, because once we were COVID positive, like I didn't have to prod myself even too much to get a positive result. Just getting a sample at all on there was, I started off, trying to swab my throat side to side and just get it right in there in my nose till I was like in tears and sneezing and getting negative results. Once I was positive, and it was just showing up left, right, and center. So don't torture yourself or your kids trying to get a positive result. If they're positive, it'll show up, and you can get a pretty good sample from their snot or anyway, that's all I want to share with you guys. One thing I'm curious, if you've already had COVID yourself, I'm curious of your experience. I don't want to get on a big vaccine pro or negative thing, but if you feel like sharing if you've been vaccinated or not, just for data purposes. And on a scale of 1 to 10, your symptoms, your experience, 10 being, you had to go to the hospital, 9 being you were basically bedridden with a terrible cough and bad fever, no energy, and like you couldn't keep your eyes open, something like that. 1 being no symptoms, 2 being very mild, kind of maybe a allergy kind of feeling, like just like maybe a little bit of a runny nose, and then anywhere in between you can gauge for yourself. For me, I was anywhere from a 1.5 on that scale to a 2.5. Most of the time, 1.5 to a 2. Today, I'm a 1.5. And most of the time, it's been pretty manageable, pretty easy. And any other time in my life, I absolutely would have went into work, and it wouldn't have even been a conversation piece for me, my symptoms. I wouldn't have even mentioned I had anything to anybody. My wife, my judgment, I would say she was probably a 7, maybe even 7.5 to an 8. She might say something different. My kids, I would say they were 4 to a 6.5 on their worst days for about 2 to 3 days, and then it was just gone for them. So I'd like to hear your feedback on your experience yourself in the comments if you want to leave that, your vaccination status if you feel like it, if not, whatever. And then a scale of 1 to 10, how you experience COVID. Hopefully everybody's doing well, and I can't wait to get back out and explore and get back to my regular YouTube vlogs. Thank you guys for sticking through the end. I'll see you in the next one.